Greetings, fellow ghouls. So nice to see you again. It's another stormy evening here at Aberfoyle Manor, and the spirits are restless once more. So I thought that I could read to us again from my collection of true... Did you hear that? I told you the spirits were restless. Let's just mind our own business here in the library and hope that they leave us alone. I've already picked out a good one for us. My middle school had a traditional camping trip at the end of 8th grade. It was either in late April or early May, and the class would go out to this place in West Virginia for a few days. My school was pretty small. There were maybe 40 or 50 kids graduating that year, and the trip was supposed to be a sort of team building and memory making kind of thing before we all went off to our different high schools. We took a big bus out to the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. The ride was long, but I remember they played movies on a couple of TV screens on the bus. Men in Black and then Cool Runnings. When we got there, we were introduced to our group leaders. These outdoorsy people who worked on the grounds and were in charge of our activities. The first day was all about that team building stuff. We played capture the flag in the woods and did a ropes course that was actually pretty fun. Towards the end of the day, though, the sky started to get gray. The clouds moved in, and we prepared our tents for the night. They had split the class up into a few smaller groups, and my group had maybe 15 people in it. The tents each fit 2 people, and there were 1 or 2 bigger tents that fit 3. One of our teachers who had come on the trip had his own tent nearby. His name was Mr. Campbell. He was our really nice and also really nerdy science teacher. He was that teacher who always wore a bow tie to school, if that gives you an idea. I had never been camping before, but my tent partner, a nice enough kid named Adam, and I managed to finish setting up our tent just as it started to rain. That night it absolutely poured. Adam fell asleep right away, but the tapping of the rain on the roof of our tent kept me up for a while, and the reality of our isolation really began to hit me. We were truly in the middle of nowhere. I began to feel slightly terrified at the prospect of that tiny tent being our only shelter from the elements, with no help for miles. Flashes of lightning seemed to set the whole sky ablaze, and crashes of thunder shook the ground beneath me. I woke up the next morning shivering. Some water had pooled in the bottom of our tent, and I had slept right in it. Adam woke up and started laughing hysterically at me. I had worn a bright red sweatshirt to sleep, and the dye from it had soaked onto my face overnight. I tried washing it off, but to no avail. I looked like Two-Face from Batman. The weather stayed pretty overcast on our second day. We started off with a bit of rock climbing at this spot nearby the camp. Heights actually freaked me out a little bit, so I had to use this special chalk on my hands to keep them from getting too sweaty. Even though this was just our morning activity, I was already pretty exhausted. And learning that our afternoon activity was a long group hike didn't exactly get my spirits up. We packed some small day packs and set off on our hike. The group leader, Mr. Campbell, and all 15 of us students in the group. We started with a lesson on navigation. I forget the specifics, but something about using a compass and a map to chart your course. We all took turns doing this. The people doing the navigation would lead the group, while the rest of us followed behind. This went on for a while, and took us through some heavily wooded areas. Just as some light rain began to fall, another classmate, we'll call him Zeke, ran up from the back of the group, his face pale. I watched him from the front where I was helping with navigation. Zeke caught up with Mr. Campbell, who was in the middle of the group, and whispered something in his ear. I watched as Mr. Campbell stopped to listen to Zeke, a look of concern taking over his face. He looked back behind us, watching the stillness of the woods for a moment, before turning to catch up to the group leader and talk to him privately. They were both close behind me now, so I turned forward to make it less obvious that I was listening to them intently. Over the crunching of branches beneath our feet, and the rain as it began to pick up, I could make out most of their conversation. One of my students, Zeke, thinks he saw something following us, Mr. Campbell said. Someone from the other group? The leader asked. I don't think so, Mr. Campbell replied. Zeke said it was an adult he didn't recognize, standing in the trees behind us. A shiver ran up my spine. Mr. Campbell sounded worried. There was something about hearing fear in the voice of an authority figure. It was especially unsettling. When did he see him? The leader asked. He said he saw the man earlier and didn't think much of it, but then he just saw the same man again. Wearing a green raincoat. He's keeping his distance, but following behind us. The rain started to come down harder, and Mr. Campbell and the group leader started to fall back as they talked. Either way, I missed the rest of their conversation. I saw the group leader step away for a bit and talk on a little walkie-talkie of some kind. He didn't seem too freaked out. Maybe it was just someone else who worked around there. Another group leader or something like that. With the rain coming down harder, we turned and headed back. I wanted to get a chance to talk to Zeke and ask him about what he saw, but he seemed kind of freaked out. I thought it would maybe be best for him and the group if I didn't bring it up. Anyway, we all ate together as it got dark and we settled in for another rainy night. Adam and I shifted our tent over a bit off the uneven ground to a spot that looked a bit higher and flatter, hoping to avoid a repeat of last night's soggy sleeping arrangements. We actually told a scary story or two, and also had to get a huge spider out of our tent before finally going to sleep. The tap-tap-tapping of the rain on our tent, once again keeping me up for a bit. After a while of listening to the sounds of the storm, I started to doze off. Crash! A deafening thunderclap startled me from my sleep. I wasn't sure how long I'd been out. The rain was pouring now. A torrent of water pounded against the roof of our little tent. I looked over at Adam. He was fast asleep. Some people have all the luck. Determined not to sleep in a puddle 2 nights in a row, I felt around the bottom of the tent. No water to be found. Looks like we'd found a good spot to relocate after all. Flash! A massive strike of lightning illuminated the sky outside. Even from within the semi-opaque tent, I could see the burst of light. Crash! Another thunderclap followed just moments after. The storm was right on top of us. Flash! Another lightning strike right away. I listened for the answer of thunder, but it didn't come. That's odd, I remember thinking. One moment there was almost no gap between the two. Now at least 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds. Could a storm really be moving that fast? It was then that something began to feel wrong. When I thought about it, that second flash had been different. Not as bright as the one before. I had still seen it through the tent, but it hadn't seemed to illuminate the entire sky as the one before had. Strange. I wonder why. Flash! There it was again. Another one of those flashes. It wasn't lightning. It was nowhere near as bright. And it didn't last nearly as long. It was coming from the camp outside, over near the other tents. Then, barely audible over the rain, a strange zipping sound. Was someone getting out of their tent? I sat up and slightly unzipped the front of our tent, peeking out at the campsite. In the darkness of the woods, I could barely see anything at all. I could make out the shapes of the other tents, maybe 25 feet away. I scanned across the campsite looking. Flash! A real strike of lightning again. The glowing crack of electricity tore through the night, momentarily illuminating our entire campsite. What I saw in that brief instant still gives me chills to this day. Hunched over near one of the tents was a man. A man in a green raincoat. The entrance to the tent in front of him was unzipped. He was holding something. Flash. It was a camera. One of those small disposable film cameras. Those strange flashes, it was him. Taking pictures. Taking pictures of us in our tents, sleeping. What's going on? Why is the tent open? Adam just about scared me to death. He had woken up suddenly and seen me looking outside. There's someone in our camp, I told him. He's taking pictures. A rumble of thunder. Adam's eyes widened and he crawled over to get a better look. Another bolt of lightning revealed the campsite once more. The man had moved to a different tent. Adam and I were frozen with fear. This was before the days of cell phones, or at least cell phones for 8th graders, so we had no way to warn our classmates in the other tents. We could have tried to go wake up our teacher or the group leader, but we risked being spotted. Who knew what he would do to us? A couple of kids in the middle of the woods. After stopping at another 2 tents, the man walked off into the trees. Once Adam and I felt sure he was gone, we ran to Mr. Campbell's tent and told him everything. I made sure to mention the green raincoat, a detail Zeke had told him earlier on the hike, and something he didn't think I'd overheard. Mr. Campbell took us incredibly seriously. He went and got the group leader, who woke up everyone in the camp, and took us to a nearby cabin where their outdoor adventure company operated. The police came. Zeke, Adam, and I had to talk to them. The class trip was cut short and we left the next morning. I wish this story had a better ending, but to be honest, it feels like it never quite ended at all. We never found anything out about the man who followed us and took those pictures that night, who he was or why he did it. To this day, though, something has always bothered me. Adam and I had watched him move from tent to tent, going clockwise through the camp as he stopped to take pictures. It stands to reason, then, that he had probably stopped at our tent before I had woken up. So there's some perverted lunatic out there with pictures of me sleeping. Ooh. Did you get the chills too? Sounds like that was a picture-perfect trip. Now it's getting pretty late. I suggest you leave. But maybe leave through the back door. There's a spirit in the foyer who's fond of beheading my guests. Until next time, fellow ghouls, get home safely.